there, I'm Weasel, and I got a little heavy in the last video, so for this one I thought I'd talk about something a little more lighthearted. At least it is in my opinion. It'll be another speed paint, this time of my very first ever Skyrim character. Well, let's get started. When I was a little kid, my aunt and her family lived pretty far away. I didn't get to see them a lot growing up, but despite that, I really liked hanging out with my older cousin. He wasn't exactly excited about having a little kid follow him around everywhere, but being a little kid, I didn't really care. I have some fuzzy memories of him playing games at the computer and me looking over his shoulder and him telling me to go away, but the game I distinctly remember was Oblivion. I was interested in how ugly the orcs were and why they were making increasingly hideous faces when you open that weird wheel with the different interaction options. I remember being mildly upset when he killed wolves too, but that doesn't really have much to do with anything. Fast forward to 2011. There was this really cool game coming out. It had all the fantasy elements, swords, armor, magic, dragons. It reminded me of the only other fantasy world I was into, Lord of the Rings. That one in particular is still really, really important to me to this day, but there were a lot of cool things that I was super into, and it was called Skyrim. What a cool name! At the time, all I had in the way of gaming consoles was a PlayStation 2 and a Nintendo DS. Skyrim was coming out for PlayStation 3. Well, I didn't have one of those, but I did have a brother-in-law with Skyrim and an Xbox One. He's a pretty cool guy, so when I mentioned I was interested, he let me play on his console while I was visiting them. I chose to play as a Khajiit mainly because they had an unarmed bonus and they could see in the dark. I figured it was two special skills for the price of one. I should also mention that I was totally new to this kind of game and at the time, so if you disagree with me, I plead ignorance. Anyway, I found a Khajiit name generator and settled on calling her Kiseena. I don't know how I decided I was going for an assassin's build since at the time I had never heard those two words in the same sentence, but that was what I ended up doing. So she got the name Kiseena the Shadow. She was all black and red, Little Weasel's first OC style, very edgy if I do say so, but I think I was in middle school, so that fits. I was so enraptured with the world as soon as I loaded into the game. Imagine it's your first time playing Skyrim and you know there's no way you can die by execution at the beginning, but there you are on the chopping block when a dragon swoops in to inadvertently save the day. It was really cool for Little Weasel. Also cool because at the time my sister's family was in an apartment and her bedroom was on the other side of the living room wall. It was really hard to be quiet at that age to begin with, never mind this city burning all around me in the game. I've played the intro so many times by now that I don't really remember the first time I went through the dungeon, but what I do remember is the first time I saw a mammoth. Now, again, I was totally new to these games. I knew that wolves were hostile and there were hostile bandits such in the woods, but I had no reason to think that a mammoth would attack me. I was thinking big cow, big friendly cow with trunk when I ran up to it and said, "Hi, mammoth," out loud. Well, we all know that mammoths in Skyrim are hostile if provoked. I guess approaching them is the same as provoking them. Anyway, that was my first time playing Skyrim, and I was just visiting at that point. When I got home, I begged my parents to get me a PS3 so I could play Skyrim whenever I wanted. My mom was pretty annoyed that I wanted such an expensive console for one game, but I'm a spoiled weasel and she bought it for me anyway. It was only after playing it for a while that I discovered it was actually part of the Elder Scrolls series. On its own, that meant nothing to me, but it was crazy to find out that after all this time playing Skyrim, it was connected to Oblivion. All these memories from childhood came back and it made me love Skyrim that much more. I mentioned in my last video that I'm usually late to the party, and you'll see this happen a lot to me. But I wish I could get my PS3 hooked up today and see how many hours I have in vanilla Skyrim, how many times I made characters and deleted them, made more characters, and so on. That brings me to my biggest point about Skyrim. I must have gotten my own copy in like 2012. It's 2020 and I'm still playing it, not constantly of course, but I always go back to it. I have Khajiit characters, an orc, I did have an Argonian at one point, a Breton. I keep exploring, creating, deleting, and creating again. Only now, I play on PC. PC opens up a whole new world for Skyrim, mods. They've got mods for just about anything these days. I got one for Fallout 4 that makes all the characters wear a face mask. I don't have healthy coping mechanisms. I guess what I'm getting at is this. Skyrim has been around for quite a while now. There's the vanilla game, the DLC, the remastered, plus all the stuff you get from mods. It has great reviews and has spawned several memes over the years. I struggle to think of another game that has stayed this strong over almost a decade. It served as my introduction to games of this kind, and I think it's one of the big reasons why I love the fantasy genre. Most people I talk to who have played it seem to love it too. Despite everything going on with Fallout 76 and, everything else, I can't help but be excited about the Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, I've played a little bit of Oblivion and I enjoyed it. I've already gone on a lot about how I love Skyrim. Here's hoping Part 6 will at least be just as good. Anyway, thanks for staying to the end, and if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing, ringing the bell, leaving a like, you know the drill. I remain Weaselbug.